Hello. So, in this episode, I'm going to be talking about the current Netflix series Squid Game, which as of right now only has one season. So, I'm glad I'm able to jump in and review it from the beginning. And I know it's taken me a little bit of time compared to probably other people to get my review out about this, but I really wanted to sit on this and check it out a little bit more and really look into some things. Maybe when season 2 rolls around, I'll get out a review a little bit quicker because I'll already know what I'm going to talk about if we get a season 2. I really do think we will, but let's start off. So, Squid Game. Honestly, if you have not watched the show, I highly recommend you stop this video right here. Do not look at any other video, not even a trailer for what this is about. If you like light horror, or if you like a lot of drama, suspense, and thrills and mysteries, if that's your cup of tea, you will like this show. And I highly recommend you check it out as soon as possible. If you have already seen this, then welcome to my review. Let's get into. I'm going to go through each episode and I'm going to talk about my thoughts real quick because we have quite a few episodes here. First off, this is only 9 episodes long, which I hate to say, but is becoming the standard structure for a season these days. I hate that because I grew up in a time period where a season was somewhere between 20 to 30 episodes. I think it's really stupid that we are only getting half as many episodes, less than half, and calling it a season nowadays. Now, in the first episode of Squid Game, we follow this man, Jin Hun, who is basically down on his luck. He owes a bunch of money to, I don't know if this guy was like a mob boss or something. And quick disclaimer, I did not watch this with the subtitles. Most everybody I've seen review this on YouTube says, oh, I only watched it with the subtitles because that's the way it was intended. I hate watching things with subtitles. Even when there is something that comes out in this country, in America, and it has subtitles in it, I really don't care for that either. I know I need it because I don't speak that language, and there's no dub of what that person is saying. But I hate subtitles mainly because of the fact sometimes filmmakers, they don't let it, they have this long subtitle and they give you like a second or two to see it, and then they put the next subtitle up because they're trying to keep at the pace that the characters are talking. So if somebody's talking frantically and they're spitting out a lot of information, you can miss something. That is why I prefer dub. That is why when I watch anime, I'll only watch dub. The other reason too is because if you're looking at the bottom of the screen, most of your attention is focused on reading what's going on. You can kind of see what's going on in your peripheral vision, but you're not getting the full scope of what's going on. And they don't put it in the middle of the screen where all the action is because they don't want it to block the action. Understandable. But if I wanted to read a story, well, then I'd pick up a book. But moving on. So I watched this entire series with the dub, and honestly, I have to say, the dubbing in this was not half bad. Yeah, there were clearly moments where the mouths did not match up, but that's never been my biggest problem with dubbing. My biggest problem with dubbing is basically you have a character who looks a certain way and should sound a certain way, but the person they bring in to do the dub just like does not fit that whatsoever. So when the mouths don't match up and the voice really throws you off, there was one or two characters in here, and I'll get into who they are later on. But, I mean, it wasn't bad. I believe that every single one of these characters provided their voiceover lines in English so I could hear their voice in English. Maybe that's not the case, but it sure seemed that way. So like I said, we're following this man named Jinhan, or Jihan, and this man comes up to him on like his daughter's birthday and says, "Hey, I know you're in a tough place. Let's play a game. If you win, I'll give you some money." And he's like, "Okay." So he plays the game, and he starts losing actually at first, and you're like, "Oh, well, what's he gotta give up since he's losing?" And the guy's like, "Well, every time you lose, for every 1,000 you lose, I'll get a slap." So like the first time it's 10 slaps. Really reminded me of the episodes from How I Met Your Mother. Um, but yeah, then he does win a little bit, and the guy says, "Hey, would you like to make more money? If so, here's a number, call it, and you can go on to this game and probably walk away with tons of money." So he calls it, and I was really shocked to see how fast we actually get. I mean, they could have spent one whole episode just building up to the first game, just building up getting there, but they didn't. We actually got there halfway through the episode. So he gets there, they get the rules of this game that they're all signed up for, and there's 456 players. And they go through the first round. They're told there are 6 rounds, 6 games, and whoever loses will be eliminated. But they fail to tell them that they'll be killed. And the first game turns out to be exactly what the title of the episode is: Red Light, Green Light. Now, I did really like this whole aspect of the show. I thought this was an interesting first thing to do. It definitely eliminated half, actually a little more than half, of the competition, and I can understand why. But when you watch it like a second or a third time, this is why I took so long, because there were some people, some people moved like an arm and weren't shot. And some people were standing perfectly still and got shot. That to me seemed a little unfair. And the whole thing later on is that this whole thing is supposed to be fair. There was one little thing I noticed, which I will get into at the end. And again, I cannot stress this enough. If you have not watched this show, stop watching this and go watch that, then come back. But basically, they all return to their room and they're horrified about what they just witnessed. Which leads us into episode 2. It starts off with everybody arguing. Half the people saying they want to go home. They don't want to be in this. They don't want to take a chance of losing their life just for some money. And one person points out that, hey, If the majority of the players vote to not play, then we get to stop. We get to go home. So they have a vote. And of course, it all comes down to this last player, and it's 50-50, and he decides not to play. Which I was not completely shocked. I was a little surprised. But I thought, okay, maybe there's a reason. Maybe he knows that, yes, while this is fun, this is also too dangerous for me. And I have nothing I'm playing for, so I'm not going to put other people's lives at risk. I think that's why. That was my initial reason why I thought he said no to playing. But I'll get more into that later. So basically, we spend the rest of episode 2 re-following all the new main characters. Ali, this lawyer guy that was really good friends with Jin Hun, this Lucy Liu looking girl, this who pickpocketed Jin Hun earlier, and we just follow them and see everything that gives them all reasons to go back. Because when they were being, when the Squid Games were going to end, some of them begged and said, hey, we don't want to leave. Keep us here, send them home. And they're like, well, sorry, that's not how it works. But we'll bring you back if you want to come back. So basically, this episode ends with all the key characters basically deciding to go back. Which brings us into episode 3. There is some stuff where, people start making groups. Little groups start to form up. You start to learn more about other players. You start to learn more about the guards. Also, on the way back to the Squid Games, there's a police officer who really reminded me of, I think his name was Miles from Lost. But he's a cop, and he slips in and sneaks into the Squid Games as a guard. And the Lucy Liu pickpocket girl, she ends up finding out that they're melting a bunch of sugar. We also start to see that there's something going on with this doctor who's in the games, and you don't know exactly what he's doing. We just know there's something going on with him. And he gets a heads up about what the next game is. So, when we get to the next game, it turns out there's these 4 doors, and you have to blindly pick a door. Then you get like this sugar cookie. It almost looked like a flat fortune cookie, I would say, with the shape in it that's almost completely trimmed out. The idea is that you have to finish getting the shape out without breaking the shape. There's a circle, there's a triangle, there's a star, and there's a umbrella. And of course, the umbrella is probably the most impossible one to finish. Of course, most of the people we're following who pick the circle or the triangle, they easily get through their game and they're safe. They leave the room. But the main guy, Jin Hun, he actually picked the umbrella, which is like the hardest shape to, win this game at. I mean, this is like probably expert level. And he comes up with a special strategy near the end, and I'm not going to say exactly what it is, So if you haven't seen it and you haven't taken my warning, maybe you'll be surprised with how he solves it. But he does solve it, and because everybody watches how he was solving it, a lot of other people got saved because of him. A few people did still mess up, but the old man that, one red light, green light, and he met back in, the regular world, that guy passes on to the next round because he saw Jin Hun get through and do this special tactic, which helped him get through his, which was, I believe, a star. So moving into number 4, we have another episode where it kind of goes like one episode there's game, one episode no game. One episode a game, one episode no game. And this is another one there's not really a game. It's sort of like a strategy to, how do you put it? Eliminate some players. But anyways, so they start to underfeed the players so that they'll start fighting amongst themselves. And one of the groups that is in this little area where they're all held up is basically, from what you've come to learn about him, he's basically in some kind of like triad or mafia type situation. He was definitely a criminal, and he's already made, so he must have been in jail because he's in his past, because he quickly makes like a little posse of, the toughest guys in the room. And I doubt they would have selected this many criminals, So he has a way with getting people who are morally gray to just go dark and come to his side. And I think they do it out of fear and wanting to be protected by him. But really, they're there to protect him from everyone else. And they get full of their head. Now, at the end of this episode, after this little riot in the middle of the night, and a lot more people die, we actually get into the next game, and they decide to leave this episode on a cliffhanger as we move into the next game.
Every time we talk about your symptoms, it always comes back to one thing.
The Mansion. Do you like reading interesting horror stories? Or listening to scary audiobooks? Then be sure to check out the latest horror short story, The Mansion, written by the fantasy author Sean Connaughton. Join the Dunn family as they make their way to a vacation home for a weekend trip. However, when the sun goes down, things seem to get just as dark inside as outside. Stay with the Dunns and see if you can make it through The Mansion.
Which is tug of war. And with teamwork, Jin Hun's team, they actually managed to create this really great strategy, which I'm surprised nobody else copied watching them. But as they're, about to do this strategy, it suddenly cuts off, and it picks right back up into episode 5 with the completion of that team's results for the tug of war. Then we get another episode without a game. Like I said, it's like game, no game, game, no game, game, no game. So I guess all the odd, well, not even all the odd. I mean, we got a little bit of a game, I guess. We got a finishing of the game at the beginning of this, but most of this episode is basically the next night. They're everybody on Jin Hun's team is taking turns deciding who's going to, well, they're not really deciding. They're keeping watch to make sure there's no attacks. But Jin Hun, he kind of took care of that right before lights out. He told the main other bad guy, he's like, "Hey, look, you can try and keep fighting us, but if you do that, you're gonna be tired for the next game, and you're probably gonna lose." And that dude was like, "Yeah, that's a good point." And then he's also like, "And besides, you say you don't trust us, but can you trust your own people?" So basically, the criminal, he goes back to his people, and he's like, "Look, guys, if we try to, stay up every night, all night, eventually we're gonna be tired and we're gonna lose to the weakest guy here." So everybody decides to basically call it a night, except Jin Hun's team. They kind of take turns keeping watch. And there's some more stuff that goes on with the cop. And the doctor, it turns out, is actually helping a handful of guards harvest good organs for the black market. And they're feeding the doctor information that's supposed to help him win the games and keep him safe so he can win the whole thing. Well, the main person in charge finds out and he decides to kill the doctor and the people who were helping him. Although one of the people that was helping him was the very guard who the cop actually took over and replaced. So now he's actually on the run, trying to hide from the main dude, the game runner. So that brings us into episode 6, Ganbu, which all the players now have to team up for this 4th game in pairs of 2. And this was a really sad episode because you get to learn about, for some of these characters, you're like more than happy to watch some of them go. But for the characters, it's like, wow. Either now I hate you, or now I'm very sad for you. Because some of them, half of them are going to die. Half the people that walked in that room were going to die. I kept thinking, like, there was this one character who did something. I don't want to say what, and I don't want to say who, but he said something, and I was like, man, if that's true, then maybe some of these people have a chance to live. But no, it was a trick, and it kind of pissed me off. But I got where they were going with this. I understood why they wanted to do this, because they didn't want the main end to be so cut clear and dry. And if the main criminal had gone up against the main protagonist, you would have wanted the main protagonist definitely kill the main bad guy in the end. But what they did here is they took a main character who was on the good side, and they slowly leaned him into the bad side. But sure enough, Jihan, He makes it through this game. Several of his teammates make it through the game. Some of his teammates do not. And that leads us into the next episode called VIPs. Now, this whole time it turns out that, these people were being bet on like racing horses. And these VIPs are masked people who come in to watch the last few games play out. I guess they stay for the last few days, like last day or two, to watch. So, the police officer, we kind of focus back on him for a little while. He finds out, you find out that, you kind of found this out earlier, but that whole reason he did this is because his brother got one of those cards, disappeared several years ago, and hasn't been heard from since. So, he finds out that his brother was in one of the games in 2015 and actually won the game. And now these VIPs show up, so he's trying to collect evidence, trying to collect proof to bring these guys down. And he nearly gets raped by one of the VIPs, which is very disgusting, but I guess, I'm just happy that he killed that dude, and that puts him on the run, because now, they already knew he was there, kinda, but now they're really hunting him down. During the time that the VIPs show up, we do get the next game, too, which is a glass bridge, in which there are two paths, a left and a right, and making a bridge across, there's these panes of glass. One is sturdy and can hold up to two people. One is weak and can't even hold one person. If you step on the wrong piece of glass, you fall to your death. And there's this whole big thing about, you gotta wear numbered vests, and Chi-Han almost picks number 1. If he had picked number 1, he would have died. There are just way too many panes of glass to get across that bridge. You'd have to be the luckiest person in the world. I think there was like 25, maybe more or maybe a little less. Definitely between 20 to 25 panes of glass. And you would have to pick the right one every single time. One misstep and you're dead. So if he had gone first, and I won't say why he doesn't go first, but he almost was going to be the first in line to go. But due to a miracle, he ends up going last, which puts everybody else in front of him. So, there was one, this is probably one of my most interested episodes, because there is one moment where this one dude, he's just like, screw it, if I die, I die, whatever, I'm done. And he just starts running across the bridge, completely randomizing his steps. And because he goes 3 on the left, then 1 on the right, then 1 on the left, then 2 on the right, before he finally falls through. That's not exact, but that's just a demonstration. And yeah, everyone's like, shit, did you just see what he did? No. So this episode basically ends up with the cop getting away, and with the game finally over And we are down to our final 3 winners. That guy who was his best friend growing up, that became a lawyer who lost billions of dollars, and the Lucy Liu girl, and of course Ji-hun. So that brings us into episode 8, where we start off with the aftermath, because at the end of the last episode they blew up the bridge in case anybody was still on there, even though there wasn't anybody still on there. And the Lucy Liu girl, she's got a big piece of glass sticking out of her side. Now, as much as they were talking about equality in these games, they should have checked the players out after that last one and made sure they were ready for the final, match. But nope, she has a big piece of glass, so she's slowly bleeding out. She tries to make her way through dinner, hardly touches her food. Maybe if she ate a little bit more, she would have had produced a little bit more blood to last a little longer. I don't know. But after they're done eating a nice steak dinner, they go to bed. She makes Ji-hun promise that if she doesn't make it through, he'll take care of her brother and her family. And he promises her. And that's when he notices she's bleeding out, so he goes to try to get her some help. But in the few seconds she's gone, she dies. So they come in and they take her body away. So now it's just Ji-hun and his ex-best friend. And now they have to play a game called Squid Game, which I've watched this a couple times now. And I'm still confused on the rules, so I'm not even going to pretend I know how Squid Game works. But now this is like the deadly version of Squid Game, because now you got a knife. So basically, you try to play this game and win it, and I guess you can stab people to win it. But, spoiler warning, I guess, Ji-hun wins. And actually, at one point, we also found out that the cop, he made it back to shore of the island, realizing he was on an island far away from land. And he tries calling in support from his police station and sending them some information, but they track him down, they corner him on a cliff, and it turns out that his brother was the front man, the game leader. I'm really hoping this is going to come back around in season 2, and that we're going to find out more about him. I'm still hoping the cop is alive, because like everybody on YouTube has pointed out, he got shot in the shoulder, so maybe the brother did that on purpose to make sure his police brother didn't die, so he could try to turn him. I think this is some kind of cult thing. But yeah, the games are over. Ji-hun won. He gets the money, and he gets sent home. Which brings us into the final episode. I'm not exactly sure where it's going to go from here. But in this episode, you learn some really big secret that, honestly, I said this when I watched this the first time. I noticed half of the things that kind of were crystal clear. And I don't want to say it because, I might as well. I've already said spoiler warning so many times. But basically, it turns out that the big person behind the entire games, the one who created all this, was the old man who befriended Jihan. And that old man is dying. And before he died, he just wanted to play through the games himself. Well, he's like, I wanted everybody to have a chance. I wanted everybody to be able to be rich. So one person gets all the money, and that's that. So I actually noticed several of the clues that would have told you that the old man was involved. Because, like, when they're playing red light, green light, I noticed he stopped before it said red light. And everybody was copying him, but he was the first one. He literally took so many steps, then stopped on purpose, and then they said red light, and I'm like, oh wait a minute, why is he stopping before she even says it? It's almost like he knows. But I thought the entire point of that game is that it's random, so people don't know, so they're caught off guard. There was also some other things, but I want you to try to look and see if you can find them for yourself. Or you can check out some YouTube videos. I've seen quite a few that have, every little detail spoiled. But yeah, really pay attention to the old man when you watch it next time. And with that said, I mean, basically, Jihan, he, has all this money, and now he's bound and determined to try to bring down the Squid Games and stop them from continuing on. And they tell him, they call him and say, look, just get on the plane and go to your daughter. Go to America. Leave it be. And he refuses, and that's kind of where we leave off. So I'm really excited to see what the second season can bring us. I heard they're going to try to make this, with an American group. If they do, I hope it's not just a carbon copy. Actually, what would be really cool is actually if we got like an American version of this game where these people that are running this, doing all this, all these rich people, that was just the Asia faction. Maybe there's a European faction and an American faction with other islands, and they get other people from other places. A lot of people have said this series really reminds them of Hostel, which, yeah, I can kind of see that, but it also really reminded me, and nobody has said this, is this really reminded me of things like Nerve, of Goddamn Paquito, the Escape Room movies. It's really reminded me of stuff like that, like the Belko Experiment. So if you like this, check out those movies. If you like those movies, definitely check out this. And I'm going to go ahead and end this here by saying, definitely, if you don't want to be reading the bottom of your screen the whole time, just watch the dub. It's really well done. I mean, yeah, clearly the mouths don't match up most of the time, but it's so hardly noticeable that, I mean, you won't really notice if you're not looking for it. And like I said, the voices sound like they belong to those people. So I think those actual actors did do dubbing lines just in case people didn't want to, have the subtitles on. So that was my thoughts on Squid Game. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you liked this review, please consider checking out my other reviews, and also, why not go ahead and subscribe. Make sure to click that notification bell, and I will talk to you all next time.